One of my earliest memories, and it was probably one of the formative things that led to us coming up with this show, was seeing the movie Snow White. And I was, probably 4 or 5 years old, and I remember being absolutely terrified of the evil queen in it. But it made this huge impression on me, and it sparked my love of stories and storytelling. For us, I think that Snow White is kind of that ground zero for fairy tales, and was one of the reasons we started with that story when we approached the show.
I think my first experience with fairy tales probably really did come in the Disney animated feature form. I remember being old enough to be looking down my nose at my little sister saying, I am not going to watch one of your cartoons. And I remember her popping in The Little Mermaid, and I remember bawling my eyes out.
Pinocchio, I loved that story. I thought it was frightening. I thought it was intriguing and exciting.
I saw Pinocchio 10, 15, 20 times as a kid.
My sister used to read to me. We shared a bedroom, and we would be snug up against each other, and she would read fairy tales to me, and I loved it, loved it.
Rumpelstiltskin was actually the very first piece of theatre I ever seen. This travelling band came around, and they performed a version of Rumpelstiltskin. It must have been a girl that played Rumpelstiltskin. She was really small, and she freaked me out completely.
I was in love with The Little Mermaid. I think I watched that movie about 1 million times. So much that my parents actually hid it from me because I was so obsessed with it.
Me and my twin sister, she likes all the Disney princess kind of stuff, so I'd always be watching Snow White and Rapunzel and Sleeping Beauty and all that kind of cool fairy tale stuff.
Hansel and Gretel was one of my favorite fairy tales, and on a really superficial level, it had to do with the gingerbread house because I wasn't allowed to eat candy. And for a kid, that's just like, it's awful.
Don't eat anything.
I swear to God, my favorite fairy tale is Snow White. And I was Snow White, in fact, 2 years ago for Halloween. It just always has been. I mean, maybe there's something really superficial about it, and that, like, she was our brunette princess, and she's the first princess. But I have always really taken to that story.
For me, I remember when I was young, my parents buying me like a box set of little books, and they had Snow White, and they had a lot of the Disney versions of the fairy tales, and I remember just being mesmerized by them, and I loved the wish fulfillment aspect of fairy tales. I loved the idea that, a fairy godmother could come and save me from my life.
They're kind of teaching you life lessons without hitting you over the head.
I think I was aware of what I was connecting with, even and feeling like an outsider or misunderstood, and wishing that people understood me, or wishing that there was some magical solution to feeling like an outsider,
Well, these things that tap way back into your childhood fears and your childhood worries.
When you're a kid, the world can be a really confusing and scary place, and hearing stories and learning about these characters and experiencing things through their eyes is a way for us to deal with the problems of our world, and that's one of the themes that we approached in writing the pilot.
I say we fight. Fighting is a bad idea. Giving into one's dark side never accomplishes anything.
And how many wars has a clear conscience won? We need to take the queen out before she can inflict her curse.
Our approach we took with the pilot was, all right, let's start with a happy ending everybody knows.
What is a happier ending than Snow White being woken up from true love's kiss and marrying Prince Charming? And we thought that's where we're going to start it, and we're going to start the most beloved couple in all of the Enchanted Forest, and we're going to literally rip their happiness away.
Sorry I'm late.
I think that's the genius of Eddie and Adam. I think that's what they wanted to set out and do, is take these characters that we all know and love and say, okay, this is what you don't know.
She's not the queen anymore. She's nothing more than an evil witch.
Don't stoop to her level. There's no need. She's powerless now.
They really have found a way to flesh out these characters so that it makes what we do know of these characters' lives, like the period of time that is Snow White's life as animated by Walt Disney, it really fills in all the blanks, and you understand how, if this girl came from that experience, how she would end up here. And it's a really exhilarating thing to see sort of what happens behind the scenes in these fairy tale characters' lives.
We all have this shared knowledge of these stories. How do we turn them from these icons into these flesh and blood characters? And then that allowed us the creative freedom to create our own take on these stories.
You should definitely be like a little cocked out, right? Like when they cut to you.
Everybody in the country pretty much can tell you who Snow White is, who Prince Charming is. And so to be able to start with that base where everybody kind of understands who these people are, what their characters want, it allows you to tell stories that are even more creative. A lot of kind of finding the twist on it is just taking kind of the story that everyone knows and asking more questions about it.
Why is Grumpy grumpy? Or why is the magic mirror stuck in the mirror? How did he end up there in the first place? And out of those very simple questions, we had to come up with backstories.
For example, I had so many people come up to me and say after the Jiminy Cricket episode, gosh, I never knew that was Jiminy Cricket's backstory. And of course, you know, they made it up.
Every now and then you'll have a moment where you're writing and you're typing character name and it's Snow, and you realize you're playing with icons, and it's a very humbling experience. And you know, we're going to be more grateful that Disney has allowed us to play with some of their iconic figures and allow us to take our own whack at reinventing or doing our spin.
The first episode I wrote was for Jiminy Cricket. The first time I put in the character slug lines and you realize you're typing Jiminy Cricket, and then you go return and you're like, okay, I'm going to write words that Jiminy Cricket is going to say. Who does that? Who writes words for Jiminy Cricket?
I remember being in the editing room with Adam, and when we were watching Dreamy and the pickaxes gave them their names, we were just kind of got a little bit of a chill, because, you know, to actually sit down and say this is how they got their names was really cool for us as writers.
The axe never lies, baby.
We're always finding complexities within these kind of famous stories, layers that we didn't imagine, emotional resonance that, you know, reads, you got to be able to cry to be in this show, basically.
When my father died, I tumbled from the roof.
So your granny's kind of intense. That line made me happier than, like, most things I've written, because it's Snow White saying your granny's kind of intense to Little Red Riding Hood. That's magic.
People watching the episode had no idea. Friends of mine were going, Peter's a wolf, Peter's a wolf, I knew it. And then when we come out and we find out that it's red, the whole room screamed.
Where's Peter? He wasn't the wolf. To add to what somebody already has, like a connection to the character, and to just grow beyond that, because the fairy tales are so short, and like you're giving them this full life and all just reinventing everything. I think it's so wonderful, and it's about time.
They lived happily ever after is you know, one sentence. Like one thing that the show does is it kind of it can expand that sentence into a much longer thing. You kind of see like, well, after what you knew happened, a whole bunch of other stuff happened.
I hate Wonderland.
Sometimes it's by putting two characters that you didn't think had histories together.
What became really fun for us with conceiving the show, which is mashing up these characters. Snow White and Prince Charming got a problem. A curse is coming. They should have a war council that involves Pinocchio. You know, we should have the Blue Fairy.
Jiminy Cricket, you know, Little Red Riding Hood.
I've sent my men into the forest. The animals are abuzz with the Queen's plan.
Our only hope is saving that child.
I'm certainly hoping for more mashups in the Snow White world. Like, I was working with Megan, who plays Little Red Riding Hood, and we were saying there's nothing in literature that separates those stories that says that these could not be one and the same.
I love how we were able to interweave characters that I never would have imagined ending up in the same narrative. It allows so many different possibilities for backstory and character.
I think it's very fun to see all these worlds colliding and see what that means in terms of all these people relating to each other.
So happy. The little 8-year-old in me is doing cartwheels just about every day that I get to go to Cinderella's ball as Snow White, and that I imagine in the future we'll find out that whichever character loves swimming is BFFs with Ariel.
You have these stories that at the surface seem to be one thing, and then underneath there's something very different going on.
That's the genius of the way the guys have tackled the fairy tale theme, is they're not just saying, let's go to fairy tale land and have fun with these characters, you know. They're saying, let's make those characters come live in the real world where they're going to have the depth of real people.
We have to move forward.
Oh, we can. Like, there's something in this world that does not want us together.
they're cursed and don't remember this other side of their personality. So it was all about drawing thematically links between who they are now versus who they were in fairy tale land.
David is a complete and total disconnect from Charming. He can't have the same moral code. He can't be as honorable. He can't be as truthful, even though all those things are inside David, but because of the nature of the curse, he can't be those things.
Catherine, I love you.
So, sorry. I meant this one.
One of my favorite things is balancing the fairy tale character with the storybook version of that character, either because you pull out some similarity or because there's some sort of contrast. The way that Megan Ori contrasted her performance as Ruby with her performance as Red was brilliant. Red goes through such a huge change, and then Ruby goes through 2 different changes as well, but then they're all the same person at the same time. So finding all of the little things that make them the same yet make them different because they've had different experiences is a really fun thing to sort of play with.
You're lucky, Red.
I know. Do you have someone? Oh, no. I'm not sure that's in my future. I think the original idea was that this was a little girl who could succumb to things as simple as beautiful apples. This is sort of turning everything on its head.
Boom! Go, Snow, go!
For me, Snow White is someone who always faces her fears bravely and takes responsibility for her mistakes, and is someone who's very strong.
You saved me.
The honorable thing to do. And then I think of Mary Margaret as being someone who cannot get in touch with any of those strengths. You know, I'll never forget that moment. The moment the world sort of blows you backwards and the one person you thought would always catch you, he isn't there. I really was excited about going in all of these different directions, fleshing out the character, revealing her flaws. And that's something that I don't feel like anybody's really done with fairy tales before.
I'm playing the evil queen. Never wanted to play Snow White. I've always been a fan of the villains in Disney films.
When you watch these animated movies, they're always quite animated, big. I really wanted to keep her human, and so working with the real human emotions helped support the character for me.
I may only be your mother through marriage, but I'm here for you, dear.
The original movie, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, I didn't use a lot of that. What I did use mostly, it's a bit of Ursula. You know, the big body, the laughter. Certain scenes require that kind of big animation, and then some don't.
Catherine was supposed to die, and Mary Margaret was to take the blame.
We may create the character, we may come up with the idea of the character, but the actors have to bring it to life.
I just wanted to win!
I think we've been very fortunate with our cast. They all bring these characters to life and put their own spin on it.
You sent me a message. Something about, help, help, we're dying, save us, help.
It gave me an opportunity to define this character for a whole new generation. So I had to think about everything, everything. Certain parts you play, all you're really thinking about is perhaps, voice or, maybe movement. This was a combination of everything. I had to think about how he's going to move, how he's going to look, how he's going to sound, and that came from the most unlikely source, my 6-year-old son. He's always wandering about the house with a strange voice saying, "Baby, baby, 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 baby." That's it. That is it. That is what Rumpelstiltskin is. He is like a child. He is going to mess you around with the voice as well as his movement.
Soon you'll all be in a prison.
Just like me, only worse. There's certainly pressure that comes along with playing Snow White, and that I want to do right by her, and I hope that the character is still as relatable as she is in this story.
And do you, Snow White, promise to take this man to be your husband?
I met the guys and talked about how we wanted to make this Prince Charming a little different from the ones that we have seen before.
And we kind of struck upon the idea in the room of doing Prince and the Pauper and saying, wait, what if Prince Charming really wasn't a prince? What if he just was a regular person like all of us?
I will find a way to save this farm, but I won't do it by marrying for riches. I just tried to bring more of that rural kind of, just everyman kind of sense to him. You know, I wanted him to be real. I wanted him to be accessible.
What do you want from me?
Oh, not me, dear. The king. He needs a prince to slay a dragon.
If I thought every day I was coming in and playing Prince Charming, I just, you know, I wouldn't be able to do it, I don't think. But, you know, we're all thrilled and honored that we're able to play these iconic characters and be able to show a different side.
Can I help you?
Are you Emma Swan?
Yeah, who are you?
My name's Henry. I'm her son.
There was something funny that we didn't even really think about until I had a conversation with Jennifer Morrison after we shot the pilot, where she pointed out to us that Emma, the daughter of Snow White and Prince Charming, was, in some ways, we were creating our own fairy tale character.
If you believe him about the curse, then you must believe him about our child. She will be the savior.
How do you create a modern day fairy tale that has been birthed from these legendary fairy tales? I think it was always sort of about the journey Emma was going to have, Henry, and what it meant for someone who'd been very emotionally closed off for a very long time to suddenly have to face having feelings and emotions that she hadn't dealt with before.
I'm no savior. But you're right about one thing. I didn't want you to have your best chance.
From a psychological standpoint, fairy tales are about self-discovery, which I think is part of what people are connecting to in this material and why people have connected to fairy tales seemingly from the beginning of time.
What happened to your family?
What happened is I'm a difficult man to love.
I think one of the themes is love, and that all the characters are looking for it. You know, love can be Henry. He wants the love of his parents who, you know, put him up for adoption, and it's Regina who wants love from her son, or it's David who wants love from Mary Margaret. And I think that quest is really important in these stories.
Everything you love, everything all of you love, will be taken from you forever. Their pain is something we can all relate to. Their joy is something we can relate to. Their happiness is something we can relate to. Finding true love, losing a true love. Love is where that hope comes from. In our show, very literally, it's the love of Charming and Snow that made Emma, who is the embodiment of hope.
There's still that little flicker of hope in her that wants to believe in the fairy tale and that there could be a happy ending in reality.
The idea of a happy ending is a very powerful thing.
Abigail, what happened to me?
You were trapped, but now you're free.
And I think living in a world without hope would be pretty bleak indeed.
Within the last few years in the world, the economic downturn, people have lost that little bit of positivity that carried them through. And if nothing else, our stories might bring back the idea of like that there is redemption at the end of the line through love and through hope.
From what I've read, fairy tales were cautionary tales. And I think that Walt Disney actually took them in a completely different direction in establishing what I feel we embrace thematically, which is these ideas of hope and happy endings.
They're a unique and rich world that people have kind of forgotten about, and when they sit down and they watch it once a week, they're like, oh right, I forgot about that.
That's what the purpose of fairy tales, you know, that sort of morality that it gives you and those lessons that it teaches you. And I think that's, you know, one reason why we're seeing all these things with fairy tales coming out, all the movies coming out and our show coming out. Those stories offer a sense of hope, and I think in this day and age that's super important.
We've just tried to tell stories that excited us and that we thought were cool and fun and emotional, and you can never predict how an audience will or won't respond, and we couldn't be more gratified that people have tuned in, and it's just amazing to us every day.
I love you.